I'm Bob Miller. I'm president of Marin Conservation League and chair of Marin Conservation League's Climate Action Working Group. The mission of Marin Conservation League is to preserve, protect, and enhance the natural assets of Marin in a changing climate. This committee focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions primarily, really mitigating climate change. Other Marin Conservation League committees focus on many environmental issues. Among them are issues of adapting to climate change. As I've said in the past, for those who are members, a big thank you. We need your support to do our advocacy work. For those that are not yet members, you can join at marinconservationleague.org. So what I'm going to do is put up the agenda. And so what we're going to start off with is a segment on building electrification with Brian Reyes and Alexi Miller. We're going to then have about 15 minutes where David Lewis, who's an MCL board member, will present a summary of a draft policy on carbon sequestration and biomass management. This is a Marin Conservation League statement. Pam Reaves will give a summary of the Marin Green Homes Tour, and then we'll have reports from organizations. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ken Strong, who will introduce the speakers for the first segment on building electrification. Ken?
Thanks, Bob. Can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Trying. There we go.
There we go. Well, the program today, again, on building electrification is timely, as I think most people know. Earlier this week, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District issued 2 new rules, one of which will effectively prohibit the sale of gas water heaters effective in January of 2027. And the other will prohibit the sale of gas space heaters in January 2029. So last year, the County of Marin, spearheaded by Brian Reyes, embarked on a program of developing ordinances to deal with new construction and major retrofits of existing construction that are in Marin. We had Brian on in February of 2022 to sort of tee up that program. And then in September of 2022, Brian came back and presented the draft ordinances to us to deal with those 2 areas. The biggest remaining area is how do we electrify the existing housing stock in Marin. And that's what today program is going to be about. As mentioned, the first speaker will be Brian Reyes. Brian is the sustainability planner with the County of Marin on the Marin County Commission Community Development Agency's sustainability team. He really was the spearhead of those ordinances last year, and will be leading a similar process this year towards developing an electrification plan for the county. After Brian has given us an idea of where he sees things going on developing that electrification plan this year and what some of the options that are going to be explored, we're going to hear from Alexi Miller. Alexi is with the New Buildings Institute, which is he's based in Portland, and the New Buildings Institute is a nonprofit that's been around for 20 years. and has spearheaded major efforts in zero building developments, and is currently working with a number of municipalities around the country as they start working on electrifying their both new and existing building stock. And Alexi will give us a broader perspective on what some of the policies are that are being tried elsewhere to move in the direction of full electrification of our building stock. After that, we'll have Bill Carney and I will curate the questions that are in chat. So if you have questions as they come up, put them in chat, and we'll start off curating and asking those questions. And if we have time, we'll open it up to direct questions from the audience after that. So with that, Brian, if you're ready to lead off, tell us what to look forward to this year. You're muted.
Sorry, kid. Classic mistake. After 3 years, you think I'd figure that one out. No, just let me know if you see this actual slide deck and not the slide with notes.
I see the slide deck.
Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see a lot of familiar faces. So today, as Ken mentioned, I'll be presenting on what we are looking forward to and the countywide electrification plan. Again, like I said, a lot of familiar faces. So I'm glad to see you all, and just want to shout out to a lot of you who are instrumental in making last year happen and getting robust community engagement. And a lot of that same process you all experienced last year will be the same as in developing this plan. One thing I want to mention here on the title side, it says electrification plan, as opposed to last year, which was a requirement development, right? A code requirement development, recommendations. This will be a recommendation as well, but this is more of a plan. So it's a little more of a vision and isn't really, got a lot of teeth to it when it comes to a plan, right? These are things meant to envision a roadmap. So just want to note that for you all. Got to start with the goals here. So at least for the county and a lot of our jurisdictions, we have 2030 goals in emission reduction that are very aggressive, right? That's the long of it. And by 2045, carbon neutral. All right, so I'm just going to dive right into it. So our policy and requirements, the stick part of it, we'll start with sort of state policy, right? So what's coming, what is kind of down this pipeline? And I see Lawrence Garber on this, I think, on this call, and I borrowed a lot of his information he originally did, because he did a good rundown of state policy. So we have SB 32. A lot of you are familiar with the Global Warming Solutions Act that happened, and so 40% below 1990 levels if we're just focusing on 2030. We have AB 1279, where we're achieving net zero GHG emissions by 2045. That finally got codified before it was an executive order. SB 100, which a lot of you are familiar with, decarbonizing the electric sector, 67% by 2030, 100% by 2045. As you all experienced in the code development last year, the state has codes through the Green Building Codes, Part 11 of Cal Green, Tablet 24, as well as Part 6, which expresses a lot of the building and efficiency standards. Okay, and then the state implementation plan, it laid out there, a state implementation plan is part of SB 32. I actually think it's AB 32. In any case, CARB will require all newly purchased space and water heater appliances be zero emissions by 2030. All right, so note that, and where that falls in the timeline with the rules and requirements passed by BACMA that Ken just mentioned. And then we have executive order by Newsom, 100% of the new cars and light trucks sold in California will be zero emissions by 2035. So that's kind of feels like cars and light trucks or transportation, but as many of you know, when I talk about green building codes and sort of electrification, it's also EV infrastructure. And so that last bullet point really spurs on the development and the demand of building out more infrastructure. So that's a building code issue. Okay, so that's the state level policy. There's so many others, but that's, I think, sort of the highlights of what influences what we're doing down at the regional and local level. So as we all just mentioned, I just put in this slide deck a day and a half ago, the Rule 9.4 and 9.6 amending an existing rule on March 16th. So it was a 4 years phase implementation plan by the Air District, saying by 2027, no residential gas or water heaters will be sold or installed. I think those are two key words there, sold or installed. In 2029, it focuses then on space heaters, HVAC. And in 2030, I'm putting this here as a state plan, but that state implementation plan, no residential space or water heaters sold by 2030. And I mentioned that in the previous slide. Finishing off the rule by back mid 2031, no large commercial gas water heaters sold or installed. So you'll get a copy of this slide deck after, and right there below a link to the fact sheet by the Air District summarizing in one page everything that they just passed. Okay, on a local level, a lot of us are familiar with our climate action plans and are working hard to ensure that all our communities are accountable to it. So our local measures that we focus on, particularly for building electrification, that a lot of us put out are focusing on energy efficiency and electrification, low carbon transport, renewable energy. Those are the big things that we can impact on the local level. So last year, again, local policy, we all worked together to develop a model reach code. Again, a lot of you were part of that process. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, truly. Here's the result of it. Many of you know this: new construction, all electric for most building types, with some exceptions. Number one. Number two, we have a single family renovations, stronger energy efficiency and or electrification requirements with electric readiness requirements as well. So that's for single family renovations of a certain size. Third major thing we modeled last year was the EV infrastructure for new construction as well as renovations. And so what we did was we increased access and charging installations. So again, that was a model reach code, and to date, and David has been summarizing this beautifully for all us as we go along, David Muller that is, but here's my rundown of it in a table that takes a little bit to digest, but big takeaway: 5 of the 12 jurisdictions have gone all electric. That's us, the county, Fairfax, Corte Madera, San Rafael, and San Anselmo. Shout out to a lot of those you that are working in your relative jurisdictions, Tiburon, Ross, Sausalito, Larkspur. Forgive me if I'm missing anyone else on that, or considering at least all electric new construction or EV charging reach codes. We'll see. To round it out, the county of Marin and us and Fairfax have adopted the energy reach code for single family renovations thus far. And then County Marin, Fairfax, Corte Madera, and San Rafael have also adopted the infrastructure reach codes by amending Cal Green to date. So sort of a summary, and don't want to go too much into the table, but that's the rundown of what's going on locally after we did the model reach code. All right, so that's what we did locally. And so, as you all know, policies such as those energy and green building reach codes are super important. We always believe, and I'm sure you all agree, that it's not a complete approach to reducing emissions and building energy use. A lot of our technology has to reach scale, and in that meanwhile, we need incentives and programs. It's important that we differentiate between both, but actually and also that they build on each other, right? So they're not a complete approach. In a built-out community like Marin, finding ways to do the incentives and expand upon it, and rebates as well as programs, in particular focusing in on existing buildings, I think are tantamount to reaching our climate goals. And I know you all want to get at existing buildings and appliances. Okay, so those are the policies and the requirements, and so sort of the carrots, the rebates, incentives, and programs. They go so fast, I don't know if I'm completely capturing everything, but this is the best I could do. So starting from all our actions and funding are really flowing from all levels. So we have the federal, all familiar with $370 billion from Inflation Reduction Act, tax and incentive rebates. The resource that I like going to and directing people to is the Switch to Electric 2023 Incentives Guide. I think building Decarb Coalition put together, I think that's a good place to start. At the state level, this past legislative session, 1.4 million multi-year budget to decarbonize, particularly focusing on 922 million programs and rebates to transition low-income residents, and then $145 million HVAC rebates, right? This is space heating and conditioning, and the contractor workforce capacity via the Tech Clean California. So that's coming online again soon in terms of re-upping the funding pot. Something important coming up is the self-generation incentive program, SGIP, and that's administered via the CPUC and the utilities. There's about an $8 million pot, right? So Tech is covering HVAC these next 2 fiscal years. There's a gap in heat pump water heaters. So SGIP's going to cover about 80 million in rebates. And so those will cover about $7,000 to $10,000 per projects. Now, those projects include not only appliance, but also the panel upgrade if that's needed, and depending on the size of tank that you have. So that should be coming down in June, July. We'll be clear on what the actual amount someone would get. So 10K, just to let you know, is for lower income qualified individuals or solar projects. Also, that SGIP has currently the battery storage and any energy generation, can reduce about 15 to 20% off of a front cost. If you want to apply it through that, there's a link there at the PG&E link right over there. It's an application. Okay, so that's the state. Flowing down to the local level, we have Electrify Marin, which I think some of you have taken advantage of, and it's great. And that's for single family residences looking to switch out from their gas appliances. We still have the BayREN rebates financing for single family and multifamily property owners. The multifamily part, where I know BayREN is working really hard on to expand, and as well as workforce capacity building and training. Electrify Marin and BayREN is stackable to the state and federal incentives we're discussing above. So a lot's coming down in terms of funding. The Marin County Gridding Business Program, I know it doesn't focus on electrification, nonetheless, they're touch points with our business community. And so electrification is one of the ways they become a green business. MCE, the rebate program for rebates and technical assistance for multifamily commercial property owners. And so resources I like to direct people to, again, the links are Electrify Marin page, and again, the 2023 incentives, or not again, but the 2023 incentives and rebates fact sheet that the county put together for 2023. So I think there's a couple more things that I left out, but I think those are the main sort of actions and funding flowing from all levels of government. Okay. And I have a freeze. Okay, here we go. So the countywide, now that we kind of set the table of the state and local policy, here's the countywide electrification implementation plan. Again, it's a plan that we're going to develop and collaborate with community, including environmental advocates such as yourself, but also the building and trades community. But our vision is to develop a countywide electrification plan that is implementable, right? Don't want a plan that kind of sits anywhere. We want it to be something that is actionable for cities and towns by December 23. With some flexibility to maybe we push that to January or February 24, just so we give them enough time to, just in case something happens in December. It always seems to be something of a delay. The goal is to crowdsource the community to help develop this countywide electrification plan that tracks with each of our jurisdictions' climate equity and or adaptation goals. So that's the vision and goal. Don't know what the outcome is yet, so I can't explain that. We're going to develop that together. But all those policies and that I mentioned really affect probably what we're going to end up developing as a roadmap. Okay, so here's the plan development timeline. So between January and March, we had some initial engagements internally, strategize our approach, and we have to procure funding because to develop this plan, we're partnering with MCEP, the county, MCE, and a steering committee from Corte Madera, San Rafael. And so in March and August, we're going to have every other week steering committee meetings, mainly from our partners at MCEP. May through August, December of this year, we'll do the stakeholder engagement. It's about 3 to 4 community workshops. It's about the same level in engagement last year, and a lot of our feedback and the way we'll do it is the same way. So a lot of our use of the process. We'll invite a lot of the same stakeholders and then add some here and there, and at least invite and hopefully participate. And by August to November 23, we'll be drafting and providing feedback of that plan to all our stakeholders that are participating, and maybe open it up to wider public feedback, and then hopefully final draft that and complete it by December of this year and January 24. The stakeholder engagement, just to dive a little tiny bit deeper into that and way we envision it, is similar to last year. And in the model reach co-development, we have our steering committee meeting once every other week. Again, 3 to 4 focus group workshops with the builders, advocates, community-based orgs, as well as staff across all jurisdictions. Of course, ad hoc presentations and conversations we'll have with you all, and commissions and electeds, as well as the staff. And the draft plan will be developed and shared with community for feedback. That feedback from last year, I will say again, I think a lot of you heard this, was very instrumental in helping shape what came out of our model reach codes and what the other jurisdictions had adopted. So kudos to all of you who are participated and really dug in the research and helping us develop it. So thank you again. Okay. And so next steps to finish up between now and August, we'll have that steering committee meeting with MCEP, county, MCE meeting every other week. And then between now and April and May, we're going to invite community participants to the workshop. MCL, this is sort of our launching coming out party for the plan. So inviting you all through MCL, if you would like to engage during this development of the electrification plan, please reach out to me or Ken or Robert. All right, so this concludes the presentation. So again, thank you, everyone. There's my contact information. That URL below is from last year, so that's got left over from last time. So I'll turn it over to Alexi, unless Ken, you want to say anything. Oh, you're muted like I was. Classic mistake, Ken.
And I think you'll have to stop sharing so I can take it. There we go. Great.
Yeah. No, I think that's, why don't we go ahead, Alexi, with you, and then we can have some conversation about some of the ideas that might go in an electrification plan.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for having me here. I'm Alexi Miller. I'm acting director of the Building Innovation Program at New Buildings Institute. We're a nonprofit outfit, been around 25 plus years, and done a lot of work in California, although as mentioned, I'm up in Oregon. I actually have personal connections to Marin, family in San Anselmo for decades, and my best friend since birth actually just moved from San Rafael to San Anselmo. So I try to get there as often as I can. So yeah, thanks for having me here. I've got a presentation, but it's really, there's a little bit of intro, but then I've just got idea after idea. I'm just throwing policy idea spaghetti at the wall and let's see what sticks. So I'm gonna throw ideas at you, and clarifying questions while we go are welcome. And then we'll try to keep some time at the end. If there's something you're like, that's the one, then let's go to that, and we can always go back to the slides as we go. Let me share this. This should be showing a big PowerPoint with a pretty building, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right. I already introduced NBI. If ever you make it up to come visit us, we got this awesome living building. What is that? Zoom quit unexpectedly. Am I still here?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to ignore Zoom's error report. Hopefully that's not a real thing. Okay, so we like to think about there being 5 foundations of zero carbon building policy. Energy efficiency has been fundamental, remains fundamental. You can't skip that part. Obviously, renewable energy, as we transition the grid, in accordance with the statewide policy of renewable grid targets, we got to think about how buildings, homes, or other interact with the grid, and what distributed energy resources, DERs, mean for grid integration, so buildings don't sort of stand in the way of that grid progress. Then we have electrifying end uses within buildings who stop burning fuels in buildings and start using the electricity that's now getting nice and clean. And then life cycle impacts. That's like embodied carbon, refrigerants, that kind of stuff. Obviously, today's conversation is about building electrification, but I just wanted to frame that Marin has been in the lead, for example, on embodied carbon, right? There's the concrete component of the code that was, if not the very first in the nation, I think it was the first for a code like that. So, this is probably nothing unusual. I just find it to be a helpful framing sometimes. One resource or piece of work I'm going to base some of this off of, there's this work we did called Better, Building Electrification Technology Roadmap, funded by multiple utilities in California, PG&E, SMUD, SCE, as well as some other institutes, research outfits. And we looked at what you can do to electrify the major end uses of gas in buildings, and something like 10% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions nationwide, everything, mining, whatever, come from burning gas in buildings. So it's obviously worth bothering with. Within that report, Better, we identified the about top 40 or so pieces of tech that you can put in a building that replace something that burns gas with something that uses electricity. This slide is full of acronyms, but the point is a lot of these are heat pumps of one kind or another. There are heat pumps for heating water, there are heat pumps for heating space conditioning, right? It replaces furnaces and water heaters. Those are the big pieces, whether it's furnaces or boilers, sure. Space heat and water heater, the big two, and heat pumps are really the story of how you get there. Also, some other stuff down in this corner, cooking, clothes drying, right? There's some other stuff too. But big picture, electrification is the story of heat pumps. This roadmap has some pretty detailed policy components. It's built on a market transformation framework, by which I mean there's a technology angle, there's a markets angle, market and industry angle, and there's a policy angle. And then within each of those, we say, what's the barrier? How do we solve it? So the stuff's available, feel free. One other quick piece of intro content I'll point out is that there are some pieces of technology or some solutions that straddle multiple foundations. So for instance, the good old heat pump water heater. I have one in my house. I put one in my mother-in-law's house. She calls it her spaceship. She loves it. But it's simultaneously much more efficient than the baseline tech. It is obviously an electrification technology, right? So that's covered, and is almost all heat pump water heaters sold, and I believe by code in California, are smart. They've got an eco-port or CTA 2045 connection. So you get that efficiency, grid integration, electrification, right? Multiple foundations at once. Quick note on those, NBI runs the Advanced Water Heating Initiative. There's a little logo down the corner there. It's a nationwide collaborative dedicated to advancing, heat pump water heaters, advanced water heat technologies, which is basically heat pump water heaters. And we're doing the first ever big pilot study of 120 volt heat pump water heaters statewide across California. We've got, I think, 32 120 volt plug-in retrofit heat pump water heaters in homes in California, and they're being metered and monitored. I think the last one was installed like a month ago. So we're right in the middle of that, seeing results. Results are promising, the things work, and broadly speaking, you get enormous cost savings from a resistance baseline, and you get roughly cost parity from the best tank gas water heater to a high performing heat pump water heater. The green lines are emissions, and you can see the heat pump water heater on the left reduces emissions dramatically, and of course it's electric, so as the grid cleans up, that drops more and more, and MCE has options for 100% clean, right? So you can really drop that down. The chart on the right, which is where the dots are a couple of rate structures. I think this is actually PG&E's time of use rates with off-peak prioritization, so basically smart operations or prime on peak. And you can see it's roughly cost parity if you're prioritizing for off-peak, and they got the smarts to do that. So just a quick note on that. Okay, so that's, just laying the groundwork that we're involved in tech rollouts, including those field validations. And there are these sort of silver bullet technologies, and heat pumps are basically the name of the game for electrification policy or electrification. So let's go to policy. Like I said, I welcome clarifying questions, and I'm just going to throw things at the wall here. Okay, so big thing that is often a major barrier is permitting for electrification. Can be a real barrier. It's a barrier with a lot of different solution aspects that we can think about. A lot of electrification opportunities in existing homes and buildings are when the thing burns out. The water heater starts leaking, the furnace breaks, that kind of stuff. Permitting can be a barrier for doing those same-day retrofits, assuming, of course, that the plumber's got a water heater on the truck and it's ready to roll. Pulling a permit is not necessarily instant. So there's opportunities for expedited permitting, either longer grace periods or temporary relief, or an automated process, or all kinds of interesting things. And we'll get into details. That can apply for heat pump water heater, just like it can for various kinds of air source heat pump. That's ASHP, mini splits, those things that sit on the wall, set up top. Or induction ranges. There's other stuff, right? EV potentially, expedite permitting for lots of electrification tech. So that was item one, right? Now I'm going to go 1A, B, C, D, etc., and then some other categories of ideas. But I think this permitting stuff is really important and is very actionable at your level. So here's one. You can give free push permits for 120 volt heat pump water heaters. A push permit basically shows up in the mail. You're like, hey, here's your permit for your project that you haven't done yet. It's free. You're ready to go. As long as you do a 120 volt heat pump water heater project and you follow the code, you might need to put in a little mailer about here's what that means. Go ahead and DIY it. And as long as you do it code compliant, we'll come take a look. You installed it per code, you get it finalized, it's recorded, done. Free, easy, pre-approval, as long as you do in fact follow code, and you just add the information on what that means. That last bullet, the city council or others would then authorize building departments to send that, not to charge for it, and sort of set the process in place.
Hey, Alexi, this is Brian. I didn't know if you were taking questions now, but someone has their hands raised up. I didn't know if you wanted to wait later or do something.
If it's kind of a clarifying question, sure. If you want to get into like how we do that in a city, let's hold that so we can have a constructive conversation, because there's
okay. So Don Jepson has his hand, so I'll let him make that.
Unmute and go. Did you?
All I wanted to mention is, I know you guys were hitting pretty hard that permits is a barrier, but there's a good reason. We're looking at life safety.
Yep.
And I don't know how many fires have been caused by faulty hot water heater installations, even going from electric to electric. So, there's a reason there is a barrier is for life safety reasons. And I'll talk a little bit more at the end. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. The 120 volt units are particularly amenable to this because they just plug in to a socket. It's an AC plug. There's no hard wiring of 240 volt or anything like that. You just plug the thing in. So just a note there. Okay. You could do similar stuff for pre-wiring at one grade or another, if you like, right? At one level or another. Define the things that do not impact life safety. Go ahead. Then you need verification to make sure that's happening, and you probably want to do the verification before the stuff goes live. But the same idea applies to prepping for electrification. Partly, this is about getting the permitting done. To be honest, partly this is about planting the idea in people's minds, like, oh, right, I need to do that. Hey, look, I have my permit. Like, let's start this project. So similar idea for pre-wiring. We can talk a little bit more about what that might mean. Also, there are certain kinds of heat pump water heater installs that you might call low barrier, where if it's low amperage, and you can determine the degree to which this makes sense. Say, for certain heat pump water heater installations, whether that's 120 or 240, one or both, and for certain panel sizes where you've got room, as long as you just take out the old gas water heater, put in a new heat pump water heater, instant permit. Still need that final inspection, still proceed, but you define the specs and you say, go right ahead. Again, it's lowering that permit barrier to reduce the time, expense, and just hassle factor to get people moving on these projects. You could expand a similar approach for all the indoor devices, heat pump water heaters, induction ranges, electric dryer circuits to replace gas dryer, pre-wiring. EVSE is electric vehicle supply equipment, chargers, in garages, stuff like that. There's a precedent for this, like the solar app for doing solar installation permitting. This is a trail that's been blazed in terms of how to expedite permitting for this kind of stuff, where you can define the rules, say as long as you follow these rules, it's an instantaneous process. I just want to add a caveat, that asterisk. It's still a good idea to do the plan checking for the outdoor equipment, like the part of the air conditioner or heat pump that sits outside. And if you do have a split heat pump water heater, they do exist. They're out there. Sandon makes one, a CO2 refrigerant split heat pump water heater. A little more expensive, but if you don't have space for the big tank inside, then that's a good option. That would probably want some plan checking, which can be slow, but it's worthy, because that outdoor equipment, you want to make sure it's in the right place, and there's not all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so there's a thought there. 1E has to do with combustion air safety testing requirements. This is about pressurization of the air and where combustion air products go. Generally triggered when you do equipment installs or trigger equipment installs in places where you have a piece of combustion equipment. So like a garage, say, right? You're replacing your water heater and there's also a furnace in the garage. Does that mean you need to do a CAS test? Well, the recommendation here is only require that test where you're messing with venting and it's going to change the pressurization of the room. So for example, you have a heat pump water heater, and you're not ducting it into or out of the room. It's not going to, it just pulls air out of the garage and pushes air back into the garage. It doesn't change anything about the combustion products. So this is a barrier that you could simply drop. If you are ducting it in and out of the room, then, that's do the thing, clearly. But that allows people to do one at a time, right? And it reduces a barrier to doing one of their two devices without having to to go do all of it all at once and do this whole thing. On the other hand, you want to keep those combustion air safety testing requirements anytime you're messing with combustion devices. And so sometimes this means adding CAES testing. You drop the barrier down a little lower for the electric stuff, and you increase safety barriers for gas stuff. Similarly, there is, if you need to put in, if you're putting in a 240 volt heat pump water heater, or you want to put in a 120, you don't have a plug right there, there's some incidental wiring that can be done. And with some training, you can get plumbers set up to do that. Basically, you run one circuit. They have a checklist of how you're allowed to do that. And there's reviews and plan reviews and such to make sure it's okay. But that can drop a barrier by not having to call in 2 different tradespeople to put in one piece of equipment. Having installed a few heat pump water heaters myself, I've found that that it's a pain to have to call multiple people on the same project. You can possibly avoid it. I was able to do the DIY, but I did have to call an electrician for the one that I did that swapped out a gas unit. Okay, so that was permitting stuff, right? 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. We can circle back to these, certainly. I want to throw a couple other ideas at the wall, kind of spaghetti at the wall. Certainly have some loaner equipment, right? We're talking about replace on burnout. People wait till things die. I mean, I do it too. And if you have waited till it's died and you don't have a strategic plan for electrification, that's when people go like for like. They haven't done the groundwork, there's not wiring ready, and it's cold and my furnace is gone. Something needs to go in like this week, right? I'm not going to limp along for months. Interesting idea to set up a program to bring in some temporary equipment, even if it is gas, to buy time to do that job right. And there's various kinds of policy support that you could do to make that, to sort of grease the skids on that, whether related to permitting or related to standing up incentive programs, knowledge transfer, etc. There's an example of this in California. There's an outfit in Livermore, Barnett Plumbing and Water Heaters, and they're running a program funded by Tech Quick Start grants, where they do these gas loaner units. So if you're trying to put in a heat pump water heater, they'll say, look, it's going to take a minute. We got to do the permitting and the work and all that stuff. We got this temporary water heater that we'll throw in for you, and they leave it there for a few weeks to a month, and onward. And now with this results of this heat pump water heater pilot, they're offering a temporary 120 volt plug-in heat pump water heater as a loaner or a permanent unit. If the person's like, this thing's fine, it's great, done, call it done. Sure. And there's a note on there, 80% of customers have decided to take heat pump water heaters when it was offered at the same price, which you stack some incentives and it's easy enough to make it same price or cheaper for the heat pump. So there's precedent for this. It's happening in California. Livermore is sort of local-ish. So it's this is I think that's an idea whose time has come. I know other folks like Sonoma Clean Power, they loan out, they have like a lending library of induction cooking hobs, countertop cookers, so people can kind of try before they buy. The Sonoma Clean Power Advanced Energy Center is amazing. If anyone wants to take a trip over to Sonoma, check out that place. It's really cool. It's right in downtown Santa Rosa. Awesome outfit. Lots of demos. You can see how all the different pieces of electrification equipment work, and they'll help you get through, plan your project, and they also have a marketplace where you can buy the products via Sonoma Clean Power on their own website. Really cool. So I think that's MCE and SCP should talk on this, because there's surely a way to kind of leverage what they've done there. Okay. A couple other things. There's some precedent for this too. There's one outfit doing this up in Tacoma, Washington. It's gone really well. basically Tacoma Power, the muni there, municipal utility, put out an RFP, request for proposal, to say, hey, somebody run this program for us. Give us an all-in fixed price, and the customer pays one number, all the incentives are rolled up together, and they get a new heat pump water heater. We deal with the paperwork, we stack the incentives, and it includes installation, equipment, and all the ancillary bits, permitting, whatever. Rolls it all together. I think that's an awesome model. It's been very successful in Tacoma. I also think it's worth considering adding on an incentive to lower that cost or that bar for eligible low income or disadvantaged residents. So that outfit is called Great Northwest Installations, I believe. They partnered with one distributor, one manufacturer. They are the installer, so they keep it real simple, $2,500 all in. And they're, because of how the Northwest works, they're not doing any fuel switching. I think that could certainly be more flexible. You know, you could find a way. They're also doing zero interest loans through Great Northwest's in-house financing. That could certainly be done with on-bill financing. Would be a lot, make a lot of sense. $70 a month, you get a new water heater, and it's you know, in and done. And then they have the low income program set up where it's free. It just tacks on a cost that sort of lives on the house. It's like a house rider. And when you sell the house, that's when they get their money back. And they're getting support from Tacoma Power to pull that off. So I can connect you to the right people there if anyone's interested in this thing. There's another one I'll throw out, and I try to go quick here because I want to leave some time and I have to drop on the hour. Electrification planning is the name of the game, right? That's why I keep talking about on burnout. And if you don't have any planning and something burns out, then you got to get something in. There's ways around that, but it would be better to have a plan. So this kind of one-stop shop model, I mean, if a group were stood up, they could literally go door to door and say, hey, we're here to help you do strategic electrification planning. Starts with an energy audit, figure out what the efficiency options are, what makes the most sense, how do you electrify? Let's build a plan so that when the things do burn out, you've got your stuff staged, you've got, you know who you're going to call, maybe some of the pre-wiring is done, and there's a lot of streamlining to be done on incentives. There's an outfit in the Bay Area that's active called Quit Carbon. I don't know if they're a nonprofit or a sort of mission-oriented for-profit, but they're doing something along these lines within the Bay Area. So maybe there's an opportunity for a partnership there, public-private kind of partnership, or maybe they just they want to spread it more, and it doesn't really matter to them whether they do every project. I don't know, but I think it's worth giving them a ring and seeing if there's a way to expand this, because I think there's it would move things a lot faster if more people had a plan and were aware that they were going to be trying to do electrification before it is the last minute. One other thing I'll cover, I talked to some really awesome people, Tom Cabot, for example, and Sean Armstrong over at Redwood Energy. Sean and his team have put together this watt diet calculator. It's just a screenshot from one. The game here is to not have to upgrade every panel in a home or a building every time you put anything in. And there's lots of 100 amp panels out there. If we were to upgrade all of them to 200 amps, it would be very expensive for the people. It's also expensive for the utility, and it's really slow. I can attest because I had to do this recently. There's a giant pain in the butt, and it costs like $5,000. If there had been a way to not have to do that, that would have been fantastic. In my case, it was an unsafe panel, but there's lots of cases where the 100 amp panel is fine. It's just not big enough unless you do this stuff really intelligently. So there are ways to, for instance, automatically share outlets. There are little devices that are easily procured that allow you to switch between, for instance, over there on the right side, you can see this one's set up where you've got your dryer and your heat pump water heater sharing a 24 amp circuit or 30 amp circuit. And then the 50 amp circuit, you've got your EV level 2 240 volt charger and your cooktop. right? While you're cooking your dinner, maybe you pause EV charging for a little bit. Sure, it's probably fine. Similarly, there are devices that allow you to switch between, EV dryer and or EV and dryers. The stuff's out there. So there could be incentives to encourage power efficient equipment, as well as this kind of smart circuit stuff where you've got either smart breakers or whole smart panels that allow you to not have to, you can put your money into the intelligence and keep it at a 100 amp panel without having to upgrade every single house to a 200 amp panel. Because if we do that, we will pay a lot of money as a society. And then I called up Tom Cobbett, who runs this panel optimization work and electrical reassessments power working group. And they sent me over a couple of key recommendations that are in here that are pretty specific. I mean, recommendation 2, develop a whole home electrification plan. I think we covered that. But some of these other ones I think could kind of flow right in. So there's a lot of words on this slide. I'm not going to try to read all of these. But I think if any of this is of interest, this idea about avoiding panel upgrades, which is a pretty big deal on electrification, I think we should make the connection between whoever you're working with and this power group to try to see what specific policy avenues make the most sense. And that includes workforce education, because a lot of electricians are going to say, well, you need a bigger panel. Done.
Alexi, would this be a good time to? Oh, good. Let's.
There we are.
The end.
That was the end.
Great. So, Bill Carney and I have been sort of looking through the chat, and one thing that I would start off with is there's been some discussion about the. You talked a little bit about the idea of energy audits, and I know that's one of the questions in the chat. And have you seen any programs where localities are requiring energy audits at the time of listing a house for sale or something of that nature, where they're required to provide a report to the buyer on the age of their appliances or things like that?
Yep. Portland, Oregon, for example, has a home energy score system where every house gets a 0 to 10 score, and upon sale, someone has to come to your house, take a look. It's almost like a sly energy audit, because there are some recommendations that come with that, but they're really coming to give you a score, and you can't sell a house without having disclosed that score. So there's definitely precedent, and there are good models for doing that. You don't have to make it up.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Bill, do you?
Yeah, well, one thing, I'm not seeing a lot in the chat. So one thing was, what might be the sort of best practices that you've seen elsewhere in the country in terms of a comprehensive existing building electrification plan? Or are we pioneering here?
There's not a lot. Those plans exist, but as far as I've seen, they tend to exist in like a particular building, or sometimes there's an organization, like a corporation, that says we're going to do this thing. There are not a lot of policy movements toward these comprehensive plans. I think one of the more like that Quit Carbon startup in the Bay Area is a good example of an organization that's trying to bring that approach to, home after home. And there are other places that are doing it elsewhere in the country, similar organizations, some nonprofit, some for-profit. But I haven't seen a lot of sort of consistent jurisdiction-wide policy actions that are driving strategic electrification plan. It's something we need to see.
Okay, or we need to evolve it right here. I'm seeing a hand raised from Lucy Reed.
Unmute, please.
You're muted.
Hi, I'm a homeowner here in Marin. I'm in, have properties in both Bolinas and San Rafael, both in the unincorporated part. And I am trying to do 2 electrification projects. And I would just simply like to say that there are a couple of steps that are very basic that I think people need to be aware of. First of all, you need to take a photograph of every panel and sub-panel that you have. And you need to make a list of all the appliances, exactly what they are and what the loads are. And then you need to make a chart of what the amps are and what the watts are and what your breakers are, because the electricians don't want to do this. And Quit Carbon asks you to send those in an email to them. Quit Carbon is overloaded still. And what they're offering is exactly what is needed, but they're just not able to provide it. I would say my experience is very frustrating. It would be very helpful if the county could find a way to make a list of homeowners who have gone through the process, who would be willing to chat with people who are going through it, and also a list of electric HVAC contractors, electricians, all of whom have actually installed a complete home electrification or who have done heat water pumps and heat pump furnaces, because the knowledge level I have exceeds what the contractors I'm dealing with.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much for those.
Yeah,
ideas.
Lucy, you'll hear more about that when Pam talks about the green home tours. There was a lot from last year.
That's what got us off the ground, but we've used every resource that has been recommended and it's still not there.
I invited Lucy to be here today because I wanted her, she's very informed, and she has experienced a great deal of frustration that so many others have experienced. And I just wanted her to be able to say that. So the Green Home Tour was trying to be helpful, but this is what everybody lacks, is contractors who are educated. And just like she said so well,
Okay, so thanks. I want to make sure that Brian gets to ask the question, since Alexi is about to leave us. And Brian, here's your chance in 1 minute to get all of your questions answered by Alexis.
I'm happy to circle back to.
Well, I did want to hear the follow-up from Don's questions earlier about the life safety issues. Alexi, do you have any comment on that? And then I have a question after that. Quick one.
I mean, I think we should pull in someone from, a representative from a planning department or a codes representative who can be specific about what the particular life safety issues are, and figure out, what are the free pre-permit or expedited permit options that don't trigger those life safeties. Like, what's the easy stuff? What's the medium stuff, and what's the really hard stuff? And at a minimum, like, let's go do that easy stuff. But I am not in the planning department, so I know enough to be dangerous, but don't want to get it too wrong.
So Brian, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I had a follow-up comment to Lucy, and this is the experience on the ground. And I think maybe if we can get Don, who has his hand raised, one more time. But I will say that us at the county, as well as MCE, we're talking and discussing about doing a technical assist program. So this is not something where, hey, here's an incentive rebates, get a good contractor, here's 3 done, like someone to handhold you. And that model is very much modeled after what's going on in the peninsula with Peninsula Clean Energy. They focus on multifamily and commercial, and hand-holding all the developers as they go through the complications of electrification. And there's a bench of technical experts to help in that case. So we're seeing how feasible it would be to do that on scale across MCE's territory for single family to multifamily residences. I don't know if we can do it, but we got to put some of the funding in place and see what happens. But we hear you, Lucy, and I know this is a big challenge across electrification.
Okay, and then Don, did you want to add something on the code?
Yeah, so planning usually has nothing to do with this. You probably want to talk to your building department and your certified building official. The building code, we enforce the minimum code, and it runs to the public. We're trying to protect the public safety. But you know, if this program has issues with having unqualified contractors try and do this work, you don't want to put that pressure back on the building department to play shortstop. That's not our role. Our role is to look at minimum life safety. We do kind of a spot check, so we don't inspect the entire work from all the, you know, screws, nuts, and connectors. We kind of do it just in general conformance of the building code. So now it almost sounds like maybe we need a higher level of building code if we don't have competent contractors installing these. Anyway, and then the other thing is, if we do any of these free, it's not free. We still have to pay staff time. So it's either coming from the general fund or it's coming from fees off of other permits. I've been advocating for a while that if we're doing like for like change out, let's say electric hot water heaters, that we already know on the hot water side of things, that if you have 24,000 residential units in your jurisdiction like San Rafael does, and those hot water heaters last for 20 years, we should be seeing about 1,200 hot water heater permits a year. We're not. We're seeing about 120, 150 hot water heaters. So these hot water heaters are getting replaced out in the wild without any supervision. And while they do occasionally cause issues and even fire, to my knowledge, none of them have caused injury or death. So maybe, you know, one thing I was thinking, like if it was a change out electric to electric, maybe we exempt it from the code, that you do not need a permit for that. You still need to follow the California building codes like we do on small sheds and other structures that do not require permits, but you don't need a permit. And I don't know if that concept could be expanded to something larger, but I think what makes that system works is make sure we have very well-trained and competent contractors. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
All right, folks, I got to drop. I just emailed my slides to Ken and Bill. So
Great.
share.
Thanks so much, Alexi. Really appreciate some of those ideas. So,
I look forward to keeping the collaboration moving. Farewell, everybody. Happy St. Patty's Day.
well, one thing that's clearly coming through is the need for contractor training. Brian, I know the county's trying to do some more of that, and you just referenced it a little bit. What do you think? What do you see as efforts to try and get our contractor workforce to embrace some of these new technologies more?
Oh, that's a hard one. You know, so I know there's workforce training coming down from the state level through tech. Bayren's looking to develop some programs, and they're continuing building the capacity of not only the contractors, but also knowledge for the inspectors and the building officials. I think a lot of that's going to have to be, it's the market transformation. If that is the demand in the market, then the contractors would and should up their game. To what extent we enforce that, I don't know, and get qualified contractors in there. We have qualified contractors lists. Those lists, even maybe people like Lucy have accessed and still had challenges in electrifying. All I could say also is, even if we train up the contractor workforce, always get 2-3 bids in there. We notice that as you get more bids on a project, that you get a better sense of what the price range is and who the contractors actually are, and if they know what they're talking about.
Corey?
Yeah, Corey, please.
Excuse me, Bill.
Hi, thanks for the question. And first of all, Yeah, I agree. I think that what Don was pointing at was really important to know. We've heard from the Marin Builders Association that between 40 and 80% of permit avoidance already. If you have 40 to 80% permit avoidance already, that means those folks are not getting all the other great green building codes that we already have in place. So what we really need to do if we want to make stuff work is encourage people to come get their permits more and get that coaching and be able to do and comply with a lot of the things that are already on the books as well. So I think that's a really important issue for us that we're looking at. So I think that sort of premise at the beginning that permit complications is one of the big barriers. I really question that. I'd love to see that data. The bigger barriers Lucy alluded to, and that's what we really need to look at into this question. So I appreciate it. We're doing this project right now that was in our climate action plan, looking at economic and workforce development and with a priority equity lens in terms of implementing our climate action plan and how do we marry those so that there's not unintended consequences, but instead we're building that capacity here. And that's a hard nut to crack, but we're doing a lot of engagements right now. And Emily Courtney's on today and working with us. And we've been meeting with different folks. Last week we met with the County Office of Education and learning about the building programs that they have with the Marin Builders Association and trying to look for those opportunities. I will just say that one big success that I love to relate is what the county did with Electrify Marin. When they started Electrify Marin, they had 3 contractors they could identify that could do these replacements for electrical hot heat pump water heaters and space heaters. Now they're up over 40. That one thing alone drove it, along with the fact that there are a lot of people here that are creating that demand. So if we can keep working in that space and maybe focus on that, I think we have a lot of opportunity to get to that early adopter piece. And once you get those folks in and it becomes more prevalent and contractors and appliance sales folks are understanding that people want electric, I think you really kind of help transform the market there. The other big barrier that I want to mention that I think is really important, it's to that panel size, but it's also the load to the building. And those issues are real and they're really challenging, especially when we're requiring a lot of electrification for EV charging as well, especially for multifamily and all that. Now, suddenly you've got issues around load to the building and you've got issues about transformers. So those are some big barriers that we need to address as well. Thank you.
So I wanted to test Brian's ability to multitask here. I know you were answering a lot of questions in real time on chat and hopefully absorbing fully also everything, all the ideas that Alexi had. Of the 6 or so that he sort of highlighted, any jump out at you as particularly useful here in Marin in the work you're doing?
Well, and Corey and Don and you all alluded to a lot of those challenges we need to hurdle. Lucy, I think it really is reflected in what everyone's comments are. I would also double down on the permit avoidance issue, streamlining, same day permits. I know people I just think about my dad who switched out in Southern California, switched out his gas heater. And I was like, hey, Electrify, it's like, I just want to get it switched and done. And we have someone at Roto-Rooter can just do it in the same day, boom, boom, done. And that's going to be a majority of people. They just want to get it done and done fast. And he didn't permit it. I don't know if we require that in Ventura County or in Oxnard where they live. So in any case, so I think that's the big, I think that's a big thing we have to solve first before putting any type of policy like a time of replacement versus a lot of things that those are things that jump out at me in Alexi's conversation. And there's so many other things that we can consider, but I think the big thing is solving that same day permit avoidance, one-stop shop. And I'm curious about Don's idea of exempting. Bayren is talking a little bit about that in terms of how do we make these same day permitting similar to the solar app thing. So anyways, that's what's happening.
Great. Okay, David. David Teta, hand up.
David, you're on mute.
Yeah, we have time for these
Yeah,
two
thanks.
last questions, and then we have to switch
Thank-
segments.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, just in terms of the contractor issue, there is a program that PG&E runs. I live in a mobile home park, and I think it's about a little less than 10% of the housing stock in California. But PG, at least for our place, has a program that's covered as part of some fees they get. And they have their own slew of contractors. And it's a whole separate group. And they are also extremely unknowledgeable. So when you're thinking about contractor education, you might think of reaching out to PG&E and working with them on better educating the cadre of contractors they have.
Okay, and Michael, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to add one unexpected anecdote about the contractor issue. I tried to get 3 bids for heat pump to replace my furnace. And 2 of the contractors said that they couldn't do it because of sound ordinances. In fact, one was Sonoma-based contractor said we just don't do that in Marin County because of sound ordinances. And they were wrong. I went to the town, I'm in San Anselmo. We spoke with the mayor and the town planning commissioner, and we went through the municipal code, and the contractors were wrong. But that's a barrier. And we also did discuss the idea of raising the sound ordinance a bit from like 40 decibels at a property line to 45. But that surprised me as being a block to getting anything done there. So just another anecdote about contractor education.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, Kim's kind of called time here, but I do want to just open it up to say, are there any other questions that would go directly to Brian that's on anybody's mind? This is really the opportunity to get things in the hopper to be considered in this very important plan being developed. So I wanted to make sure we had picked up everything.
Yeah, Bill, David Lewis, who's the next speaker, has to leave at 10:30. So what I'd suggest is that people put their questions in chat.
Okay.
And we'll be sure that Brian gets those questions.
Great. Okay, well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
I'll remain on for a couple of minutes to any questions arise.
So, yeah, those were terrific presentations and discussion. So we're going to have David Lewis, MCL board member, talk about Marin Conservation League's carbon sequestration and biomass management policy statement. As I said, David has to leave at 10:30, so I'm going to make this brief and just switch over to you, David.
Okay. Just let me confirm audio, and thank you all for the time for having me. And I really have been watching the previous conversation, and I'm grateful for that topic being brought to MCL and COG and the work being done there. What I want to share with you today is just the general framework and content and substance for Marin Conservation League's carbon sequestration policy statement. We briefly shared that we were working on that last meeting for you, and Bob and the organizers of this committee thought it would be useful for you to have a brief overview of what's in that policy statement as we finalize it and bring it to the board for approval. We are aspirationally hoping we do that sometime and hopefully at the May board meeting. So I start here with 2 maps. One map on the left sharing with you the different parks and open space as important parts of Marin County to be considering habitat and ecosystems. And I share with you a map on the left that comes from the Marin Climate Action Plan 2030 and work on working lands and focus on opportunities for carbon sequestration on the agricultural lands and working lands of Marin County. So keep those landscapes in mind and those places in Marin County in mind as I proceed here. Okay, for some reason. Okay, I want you to know that the climate change policy has really 3 complements, and it's important that you have this context. You all as COG, the Climate Action Working Group, brought forward MCL's first climate change policy and that was approved by the board in June of 2021. In developing that policy, there were 3 areas that were identified as needing additional work and had the potential to have their own policy statements. Those include sea level rise, which is already completed. That was brought through to the board last year, and 2 other policy statements that are being worked on, one carbon sequestration and one biodiversity, both as they relate to climate change. And so today I'm here to let you get an inside view of what's in the carbon sequestration policy statement. I'm really not sure why. Okay. The impetus for carbon sequestration to go beyond greenhouse gas emission reduction goals comes in a couple places, and you all certainly know of other impetus and documentation of the need to sequester carbon beyond reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But of course, the Climate Action Plan 2030 has very robust goals in terms of achieving greenhouse gas emissions, but goes beyond and sees the benefit and need to seek sequestration offsets and mitigation. So many of you know these goals in this graph and have even were part of crafting these goals when Marin County and Drawdown Marin were drafting the Climate Action Plan. Similarly, at a state level, and you all just last meeting benefited from a presentation about getting to neutral for California and the recognition of what needs to happen in terms of removing carbon and CO2 from the air annually in order to achieve those goals. So I just wanted to share with you the overall analysis and the drivers to do this work, this carbon sequestration work. It's important to start with some definitions, and so you all know much of this, but in general, carbon sequestration is the capturing and storing of atmospheric carbon in appropriate pools or appropriate sinks. So keep these definitions in mind. Now I'll just kind of briefly, without reading this slide for you, let you internally see how the carbon sequestration policy is organized, and help you understand what it is focusing on, and also importantly, what it is not focusing on. Again, I've already given you some of the background and motivations, but the document helps to give that. It'll provide an overview and definition of how MCL is looking at carbon sequestration. And then to really emphasize that in this policy statement, MCL is interested in making policies and understanding nature-based solutions and not the direct air capture or other technologies. And so very purposely is focusing on this subset of what we call nature-based solution working areas. Just some general, in the sections there, just generally how it's organized. And this is an opportunity for us to share with you that going forward, we're trying to use this format and this template of goals, objectives, policy statements, and collaborations and partnerships, followed by resources for all of our policy statements. This is a recently introduced template. We're trying to standardize across all of MCL's policy statements, a standard template. So just a couple slides here, pictures, just to emphasize what this policy statement's about. It's about what's the potential to either preserve or enhance the amount of carbon sequestered in Marin's forests, its oak woodlands, and the potential for managing those, its grasslands, whether that's on parks and open space or in working lands, riparian areas, and the ability to either protect existing above and below ground carbon or through restoration, increase sequestration, blue carbon and wetland opportunities. Here you're looking at a recovered wetland, tidal wetland near Hamilton, but where else are there opportunities, and what's the potential for the carbon that could be sequestered in those kinds of changes in land use and restoration of ecosystems? Urban forests play an important part in our recognized for their potential for sequestering carbon and other social economic benefits of urban forests. And this is a picture of Novato, just as an example. We take time to really dive in and think about biomass as it relates to managing the landscape for fire fuels and the reduction of intense wildfire risk. It is important to point out that there is a whole biomass utilization collaboration underway. Many of you here in COG are part of that collaboration. This policy statement is waiting for that utilization study to be completed. And at the moment, and for the purposes of what's ready and can be discussed, we are focused on how do we support fire fuel management that matches and aligns with MCL's conservation goals, including carbon sequestration in those ecosystems that are being managed for fire risk. And then lastly, working lands, and again, how carbon farm planning starts at the farm scale and identifies practices to be implemented that result in carbon sequestration over the long run. This includes what some of you have already learned and know about compost application, but in addition to that practice, there are another 30 or so that contribute to carbon sequestration on Marin's agricultural and working lands. I'll just end here with maybe a couple high-level discussion points and see if they're useful, and ask Bob and I think even Bill Carney if Bill Cole's on. You've seen this policy statement in its draft form, but just want to confirm that the approach and statement as I've shared with you today, how it complements the original MCL climate change policy statement of 2021. COG members input on the nature-based solution approach, and that we're not focused on direct air capture and other carbon capture and storage technologies. And then any other questions or things you might want to bring up. And I'll pause the share and hope that met the needs, Bob.
Thanks so much, David, and thank you for your flexibility in presenting now. I know you have something else. Want to say that Marin Conservation League is developing a draft of this policy statement now, and as soon as the draft has been revised another time, we're going to make the URL for the draft policy statement available to everyone, and that will set up a later discussion. So I'm not seeing any questions in chat. Do folks have? Oh, I do see a question in chat. Bob Archer asks, how does the policy deal with the very troubled carbon offset program approaches, those that are voluntary and programmatic? That's something, David, that you and I have discussed a little bit.
Yeah, and I might ask Robert to elaborate a little bit, but there is purposely in there, and Bob, you certainly add where I might miss something, purposely in their discussion of both voluntary and regulatory markets and different opportunities to fund, particularly the working lands initiatives, but others, and the recognition that the delta between what it costs to implement some of these practices and sequester the carbon and what any markets are paying is so great that there's the need for other sources of funding. I'm not sure if that's what Robert's question was pointing out, but we did try to explore that and provide some policy about it. Bob, if there's anything I'm missing or if I misunderstood Robert's question.
Yeah. So Bob, this issue is complex, as you very well know, and so what we've done is simply mention that there are carbon offset programs, but we haven't gone into any deep analysis about the pros and cons different types. And I think that at some point we'll want to have a statement on different market mechanisms for reducing carbon emissions and for sequestering carbon. But this document doesn't go into it in any great detail. Are there more questions? Are there any comments? Well, thank you very much, David. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you, David.
Very well
much.
done.
Thank you for fitting me in today.
Okay.
Have a nice day and a good Friday.
Great. Okay, so we're going to switch over to Pam Reaves, who's going to give us an account of the Marin Green Homes Tour. And I know that Alexi Miller mentioned the showroom that Sonoma Clean Power is making available to folks, and she'll have some comments on that as well. Pam?
Hi, everybody. Just a quick review of what the Marin Green Home Tour accomplished last year. And we're going to have another one this year, but we are tweaking it a bit. But so our goal is to have a free virtual tour to help see what residents are currently doing in their homes to combat climate change, improve air quality, and generate clean energy, save water, and move toward a safer, healthier, greener, and more resilient future. So this year, we're going down from 10 homes and 2 evenings to, we haven't fixed on the number yet, but 6 to 8 homes in 1 evening. And this was from some important feedback from others. And just to let you know that there have been 726 views of the home videos. And because you can, if you go on maringreenhometour.org, you can easily click on the links to see any home you want, as many times as you want. And you can click on the links to see the presentations, watch the whole thing again if you would like to. The website itself has had 4,630 visits from 3,276 unique visitors. And what we're looking for this year is to have a little more variance of homes, not focus so much on the high-end homes. And maybe there are only 2 of them in the show, but we're reaching out to, in the Marin Builders Association, in their newsletter, Bob Brown, the new coordinator of our tour. I'm not the coordinator this year, but Bob Brown is. He has reached out to the Building Association to see if we can get a builder on our steering team. I think it's always a good idea, just like Brian pointed out, to get all the stakeholders together. And we'd also like to get contractor on our steering committee, because I think it's a way of educating them and helping them spread the word to other contractors or other builders. So if you know of some that would be interested in at least talking with us, because a lot of you know so many people, please get in touch with me. And I don't know if you have any questions about the tour, but we're always really open and want feedback about what you liked, what you did not like about the tour. And if you haven't watched it yet, it's pretty cool. So then I'm gonna,
Pam, there's a question in the chat about how it compares with the East Bay tour, Green Homes Tour.
we copied them. That's where I got the idea. And we also hired Amy Kaiser. She's the one that actually runs the tour in the East Bay. She didn't run ours, but we hired her to consult, and we're hiring her again. She's fantastic. So that's how it compares. We tweaked it to have more variety of home types, and I think she did that in the East Bay. And so we're supporting each other. And then I took a tour up. I've done a couple of things just to test out how all these things work. I've interviewed with Quit Carbon, with Bayren, and with something Al Grummett told me about out of PG&E, what's at Home Intel, and all of them have been frustrating. I found it particularly frustrating speaking with Bayren yesterday, not being able to answer my questions. Quit Carbon isn't quite up to speed yet, but their model is an excellent model, and they're very willing to come and speak to MCL. They have a 10-minute presentation that they do. So then I drove up to Santa Rosa to see their phenomenal Advanced Energy Center. And what was it, Alexi, that spoke about Sonoma Clean Power? My goodness, if you go on their website, there are so many resources available. And they, the Sonoma County Sustainability Division just changed their name to CARD, Climate Action Resiliency Department or Division. And they partner really well with the Sonoma Clean Power. So what I'm just blown away by how wonderful they are. You can get for free. There's a consultant that works with the county that will overview all of your solar needs, and then look it over from the bids that you get. Will look them over and tell you if they're overbidding or, oversizing or under. Just an expert in the field, and his video that's on solar power and energy and storage is just fantastic video, very educational. Alexi mentioned this do-it-yourself toolkit. You can check them out from the library in any of their Sonoma or Mendocino. It even includes an infrared laser thermometer that you can go around and check yourself to see where your leaks are. And a lot of the stuff you get to keep because it's caulking and shower heads and all different things, but it's just amazing to me. It comes with a kilowatt, KILL, watt, that you plug your appliance into to see how much energy it's pulling. So I wholeheartedly agree that there's some things that MCE could be doing. Just to let you know that the Energy Center, the Advanced Energy Center, is funded by the California Energy Commission from a grant from them. So their grant's available, it appears to be. You can walk around in that site and see that the only thing they don't have yet is a heat pump dryer, but you get to see I learned about new products. I got to see about the 120 volt hot water heater. They have a setup in the large space that's apartment setup to show how apartment dwellers can save energy and keep their comfort. So any questions? Okay. Oh, hi, Brian.
Hey, I had a question.
Okay.
And I'm still here, yes. Glad you did a discovery process. What particular things did you find frustrating with calling Bayren?
Well, it took me three signups to get in the first place. The only way I think I got a response back was because Mark Shabria intervened for me probably via
Good.
phone. And because Mark is on our Green Home Tour committee, and he's fantastic. The whole
Yes.
team over there is fantastic. And when I got, then there were 2 emails from the person that was I got, and he said, follow this link. There was no link in his email. Then then the phone call yesterday, I could tell he was reading a script instead of actually listening to my answers. So I found that very frustrating. And I don't know when I'll even get, he said it'll probably take a while. I don't know when I'll even get information back from him about my questions.
And what was the sorry, Pam, to interrupt. What was the sorry, I kind of missed out. What was the initial question about you were inquiring regarding?
Oh, for what I wanted from Bayren?
Yeah.
Information about mini heat split versus ducted heat pump.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then the website, I've tried it on my iPad, my laptop, and can't get the contractors list to come up again. And I asked him if he could send that to me again, and I haven't heard back. So either there aren't enough of them, or I don't know, it's just frustrating. It was frustrating with the one that you recommended. It seems terrific. It's this free something from PG&E that's been around since 2012 that I've never heard of before. Al told me about it. And I don't think, Al, that they were going to get back to me with an expert or anybody to talk to me about my question. And that's why I just waited to see without you intervening for me. And so I wrote to them and asked, and they said, oh, sure, we'll set you up with someone, but I don't know how or when, or so, and Al can maybe tell a little more about Home Intel.
Yeah, I spoke to someone very knowledgeable there who had a lot of insights into all of the electrification options. I didn't get to the contractor recommendation level, but he seemed quite fluent in the technologies and the equipment, which I was impressed by.
That would be Sue.
Yeah, well, first I just want to thank Brian for all the work he's done on this. It's a lot of work, and it's just a fantastic, the REACH codes are just a fantastic accomplishment. So thank you. But I just also wanted to echo what Pam said about working with Bayren. I know several people who it's just been a frustrating, long process to get their rebate. And, versus Electrify Marin, which was so simple for most people. So I think Bayren's got some issues with getting the rebates to customers.
Yeah, and in the, thanks, Sue. In the chat, Mina Kim says that she had a similar experience, Pam, where she didn't get a response from Bayren. So it sounds like it's pretty hit and miss as to what kind of information you're going to get and whether you're going to get good information. Obviously, that's something that needs to change. So Brian, you'll have to use your extraordinary influence to twist arms here.
Oh yeah, this is good information. I'm definitely sharing this back with Bayren.
Okay.
I had a good
Uh,
experience with Bayren when Kelman, what's his first name? The other Mark's
Kellen?
yeah.
Yeah, we're all on the same team. Yeah.
Okay. He and a wonderful guy from Bayren came out with Telemundo and filmed, videoed here, and whoever that Bayren guy was fantastic. But he doesn't have the same role with Bayren as what we're talking about and trying to get information.
Yeah, I think the lesson learned there is one, well, Bayren needs to improve, but the other thing is you already have Mark and Kellen's information, and we try to direct everyone to them because they are sort of paying attention more to the community here, whereas Bayren's sort of regional, so I can see where you run into some pain points with the person reading a script. Yeah, but Mark and Kellen are they're on it. So as many of you know, so that's always the first place to go. But I'm glad you still did the discovery process there.
Bill?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask a question of Brian. Pam's given a very glowing report on what's happening up in Sonoma. And I wonder to what extent, you're coordinating with them or borrowing from them or, building off of what they're offering, particularly in terms of the resources they make available to the public.
Yeah, I will say that the relationship with Sonoma can improve in terms of the communication. I know we have strong ties in terms of the contractor community because they kind of flow between Marin and Sonoma. In terms of programs such as this, it's they're not part of the 9-county Bay Area, quote unquote, right? So it's sometimes hard to go beyond that. It doesn't mean we shouldn't. But we know what they're familiar with. I think what Pam was referring to with the Clean Energy Center, the Sonoma Clean Power Energy Center. I think that's a great resource. Here in San Francisco, we've had a similar resource for the last 20 years. So it has been a tremendous resource for contractors also to get trained and professionals on whatever the latest energy efficiency, or in this case now electrification policy is out there, or technology rather. And so that is a good resource. I don't know if I'm not going to speak for MC, but I think that's spot on in seeing what they can or can't do to that end and be a part of it.
Yeah,
but yeah, Sonoma, we are familiar with some of their planners. We still go back and forth sometimes on policy, but not too much on incentives and rebates.
Yeah, I was wondering about that Clean Energy Center in particular, and whether that's something that, rather than recreating one here,
yeah,
could we borrow that one, or could we send people up there or have some cooperative thing with them?
It should be. I mean, we had a team offsite, took the SMART train and landed there. And it was, anyone can access it. It's like the one in San Francisco that's been there for 20 some odd years. There are people from Canada taking trainings there because they were so high. There was a range of beginner to really highly elevated, like retro commissioning, mechanical building science engineers. So everyone use it as a resource, and it's they're not going to turn you away if you visit. So I think it could be something that can be used even with us here in Marin.
Yep, great.
I think I just want to add on to that, Brian. One of the things that the county, Sonoma County, provides that expert in looking at and helping you with solar and energy. People like Lucy, who was here earlier, the trouble she had with getting good information. Our city council member, Rachel Kurtz, texted me and asked questions about storage because she has solar, and she was given really funny information from that company that she'd have to add more panels before she could add storage. And, you know, that's the kind of question that somebody who doesn't have any, won't get any profit from it would, and he had worked in the field for like 8 years before. So.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before when Lucy went on, and again, Pam, thanks for bringing her on, and as well as everyone here sharing their experience. And I think it reinforces our technical assist program idea. Really, Cora and myself, as well as Dana, really discussed that, and we discussed with MC, and it's something that we think can be fruitful. And basically, that is local here within our service territory, and walking people through all these complicated incentives, rebates, programs, contractors. Again, fortunately, there's a precedence down in Peninsula Clean Energy down south that we can borrow from. So basically, it's not us at the county level or the Bay Rent operative who's going to help you. They might connect you, but basically you would get a call from a bench of contractors who know what they're talking about. Like, I have a problem with electric panel upgrade. Well, there's someone who knows how to do the calculations on optimizing the panel, or here's what you should be looking for, like really helping those people go right to the meat of the problem, the challenges that they're having. So we're hoping to stand that up again. A lot of these things take funding, so we're trying to put that in place. But we heard that during the model reach code process from some of you and some other people across the community, as well as contractors that we engage with, and themselves see that as a challenge. Like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I didn't know that was there. So this was sort of what we came up with of, oh, let's do the technical assist program and see if we can stand that up.
Great. So is there any further discussion, any further questions for Pam or for Brian? Tim?
Hi. Some of you may remember me. I was on the board for 8 years and worked a lot on energy. I'm still working in the energy profession. But Brian, and if someone could shoot me an email, it would be great too, because I'm willing to plug back into MCL on the electrification issues. I just haven't had a lot of bandwidth in the past, but I'm willing to get involved again. But Brian, just all these questions that are coming up, is there a frequently asked question somewhere, or best practices being developed, sort of a wiki that can continually add to and say, we don't have answers here yet, but here's best practices, or here's what you should know? Because there is so much misinformation coming from contractors and frankly others, as these questions that are being asked today roll in, and the experiences. It would be great if we could start putting together a wiki with a collective wisdom for this, that people can go to and see if their question's been answered, or if they're getting good information.
Yeah, I think that's something we can mimic what we did during our model reach code process last year. We did have an FAQs that we developed. So I anticipate us doing something similar as well. So thanks for the suggestion and reminder, and I think we will end up developing something like that.
Great. Okay, I want to thank you again, Brian, for the work that you do. We're lucky to have you doing it.
Thank you. Then I'll hop off, and thank you, everyone. Like, this has been a very fruitful conversation. So great work setting up the speakers and everything that you all did, and your questions. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So we only have about 8 minutes. We do have time for 3-minute maximum reports from organizations, and quite a few organizations here. So Jody, you want to start off by giving a 3-minute report on 350 Marin?
Sure, I can do less than 3 minutes. The main thing I want to just mention is we have an action next week on Tuesday in solidarity with a lot of other organizations nationally to stop dirty banking. So go to 350marin.org if you're interested in more info. But we're going to gather at the banks in downtown San Rafael and just walk over to the city bank for about an hour protest. 3 of our interns, our high school interns, are going to be there speaking. So come on out and support us if you'd like. And the only other thing is, I think I mentioned Archie Williams High School did this incredible video for us, promotional video, along with 13 other nonprofits across the bay, across Marin. So anyway, ours is up on our website, and it's really sweet of them. Their communications at Academy did it for us. So that's posted on our website too.
Great. Pam?
I've got a question, Jody. Is 350 Marin also getting engaged with regenerative agricultural practices and pushing the for the new farm bill to be? Could you say something about that?
Well, you could go to our website and we have that listed under campaigns. It's a new campaign, our Regen Ag and the work with the Farm Bill. Andrea is primarily spearheading that, but our interns are working on that as well. So yeah, definitely go there and check it out. If you have questions, we can get you in touch with Andrea directly, but we're definitely trying to track and work with what's going on across the county more closely on Regen Ag and carbon sequestration.
Great. I promised Tom that he'd be able to say a couple of words about the Green Change Earth Day event. A minute or two, Tom?
Yeah, the Earth Day event is really shaping up to be a great one. Our second year, we have a lot more support from other organizations, including green businesses, including at least one very reputable contractor that's installing a lot of electric heat pumps. And there's a wide range of activities that are very family friendly, a lot of art, music, games. There's a particular focus on youth, and Al Grummett is leading that effort, working with youth. In fact, there's going to be an opportunity for youth to have a private meeting with our local elected representatives. In terms of things for the younger kids, there's even going to be a puppet show. So there's a lot of fun stuff, but a lot of really good information. MC's, of course, going to be there. Water is going to be there, Marin Water, and there's just going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be really of interest and value to the beyond the environmental choir. Beyond our usual suspects. And we're looking for people to help with that day. If you can just help for one day, it's going to help a lot to have some additional volunteers. So it's a way to get people engaged in playing an active role, even if it's just for just one day. So friends, family, folks that might be able to get involved in some way, get in touch with us through greenchange.net events. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. David and Belle. David?
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. So you recall the chart that Brian Reyes put up that showed the status of adoption in Marin County of the 3 building electrification reach codes. And I just wanted to give everyone a very brief update on that. Tiburon has a first reading to adopt all 3 of the reach codes on April 19th. Larkspur on that same date is having a public workshop to consider adopting an ordinance which would meet all 3 of those reach codes. Ross last week directed staff to prepare an ordinance for all electric for new, and 3 other jurisdictions continue to nibble, I think would be the best way to put it: Mill Valley, Sausalito, and Novato. So we're continuing to move ahead with all those, and I expect we're going to get at least a few more jurisdictions in the very near future here. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Bill?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is a somewhat different subject, but this has to do with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority and the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership. I just wanted to announce there's going to be a public field trip, and it's taking place on the 28th of March, and it's taking place in Marin City, and we'll be joined by the National Park Service, Marin County Fire, and we'll manage lands. And the purpose is to show the work that has been done for fire treatment in Marin City. And I think it'll be most interesting. It's not for a hike, but it's to actually see and talk with others in the community who are working with us. And then I just want to add one thing, as long as I have the mic, and that is was it Bob Archer who asked the question about economics or about earlier?
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to say that it is a good question, and I think we should have a separate session on that very subject. So we're looking for that, and I'll talk to you about it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I'm going to call on myself for 30 seconds to say that Damon Connolly will be the main speaker at the next Climate Action Working Group meeting on April 21st. And he'll be talking about climate change and other environmental legislation at the state level. So that should be a very interesting session. And Bill, you want to give the last announcement?
Yeah, thanks. So Sustainable San Rafael's been, working with the city. The city is about to re-up its 2-year priorities under their climate action plan. And it's going to be reviewed publicly, informally at the May 4th, 5 o'clock meeting of the CCAP quarterly update group. And among things on there, we're also trying to get some stuff completed in this fiscal year under the current priorities, including the electrification REACH code relative to rehab. That we expect to see that in June and be able to check that off. And we also have on the urban forestry front, we have a street tree ordinance that we've been working with for a year and more. And we hope to have that in by June as well. The other significant thing we're looking at is the EV strategy plan. I see Christine is on the line here. We're hoping to get our hands on the current final draft of that in order to review. But that's a really significant thing for all of us to be tracking on, along with building electrification. Thanks.
Great. Okay, it's 11 and 2 seconds. So I think we've done our 2 hours, and hopefully I'll see folks in a month. Thank you.